So Jeremy, your book offers very dramatic predictions of AI's impact over the next decade. Suppose we can really travel through time to the year 2034. As a writer and thinker, what do you think will be the most underestimated change brought about by AI?
Yeah, so I think there's several things, but I think we're sort of vastly underestimating the extent to which this is going to change the way we kind of interact with the internet in a way that Google kind of changed the way we all search for information. I think the sort of AI chatbots and actually more agentic AI that's coming along is really going to change the way we interact with digital information in a way that's kind of very profound. It really is like the next platform shift. And I think we're in the future not really going to do a lot of this searching ourselves. We're going to have these AI agents that kind of go out into the world and do our research for us, do our shopping for us, plan our trips. And I think that's going to sort of profoundly change the way companies potentially interact with customers and the way we all interact with each other in ways we haven't really grappled with. And I think a lot of companies aren't really grappling with. So I think that's one of the biggest changes if you project forward a decade that we'll see. I also think in all of us who are sort of knowledge workers, there's going to be kind of a co-pilot that works alongside us in our jobs, and that's going to change sort of how we function in our daily jobs. And I think a lot of people aren't also sort of thinking too hard about that at the moment.
Your answer reminded me that one of the seminars I listened to mentioned a topic called general computer control, which sounds harmless, but think about it. This could be a shortcut to AGI, that AI can understand what's on the screen, can take actions, interact with the cyberspace through a PC. So if not properly regulated, this could be followed by things like feeding the public with misinformation, fake news, etc. So is this like opening a new Pandora's box?
Yeah, well, I do think, so that's the kind of agentic AI that I was talking about that I do think is coming. But I think some of the risks you have to sort of look at how much of an additional risk you have from the technology. So if you talk about disinformation, for instance, we already have quite a lot of human-generated disinformation out there. The question is, if you have an agentic system, is it that much easier to produce something at scale and then also put it out into the world and kind of create a whole strategy for a whole disinformation campaign? I think what I worry about most with the sort of digital agents is actually, yeah, there are some interesting issues about control. I worry actually about sort of scams and crime and this sort of thing, because I think right now there's already systems where you can tell ChatGPT, like, what's a way I can make $10,000 in an hour? And it'll tell you some ideas for doing that, but you have to then go ahead and implement that idea yourself. And so far, when people have done these experiments, mostly ChatGPT recommends you run some sort of marketing thing where you're then paid to market somebody else's product on the internet, T-shirts or something like that. But it could very well in the future be that, oh, go make me $10,000, in the next few hours, and don't tell me, I don't want to know how you're going to do it. I think you could very well get a system that says, oh, well, a great way to do that would be to run a phishing campaign, for instance, and we'll just send a bunch of scam letters to people and tell them to transmit money to your bank account. And the question is, if your system goes off and does that, like, first of all, who's liable for that? But also, that's a risk that we really want to try to avoid. So I think the guardrails we have around agentic systems are going to be really important.
So as you wrote, if we can try to govern AI, like what we did with nuclear power, for example, what do you think our government and the international society can do now to prevent all these from happening?
Yeah, well, I do talk in the book a little bit about different analogies for governance, including, nuclear power. And I do think we need different levels of regulation. I think we should do some stuff at the international level that puts some basic limits on what this technology can do. I'm not, if you read the book, you'll see that I'm not super worried about the sort of existential risk scenario, but I'm worried enough that I think we should take some action to head that off. I think it makes sense to do that. I don't think that should sort of crowd out what we're doing to deal with more near-term risks, such as disinformation, such as bias in AI systems. I think we need other regulation to deal with that, and that could actually be done more at the national level. I do think sort of every country is going to need a regulator that actually understands the technology, has the power to kind of look at what technology companies are actually building, and have some meaningful control over that. And that we need some standards around what these controls should be. I do think there are risks here, and we need to have a regulatory regime. I don't think you can just have a completely laissez-faire system.
I think your book mentioned a lot of things actually are working. One of them is called constitutional AI, which is adopted by Amazon's large language model, which is to give AI model written principles, a constitution to follow. So what it should be, or maybe it's already written in that constitution.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting. So constitutional AI, for those who don't know, is something that was invented by the folks at Anthropic, which is one of the sort of leading LLM companies, founded by a group that broke off from OpenAI. And their idea was to give an AI system a written set of principles that it should check every answer it's giving against and see if it conforms with these principles. This does seem to produce more robust guardrails than some other kinds of ways of trying to create guardrails. However, it's not foolproof. There's still ways around this, so I think we still need more research. But I think it's not a bad idea. Then the question becomes, well, whose principles are in this constitution? And that's a very fraught issue. And I think Anthropic's done some interesting work on trying to survey the public on what do they think should be in this constitution. And they've found, 2/3 of the people kind of agree on what should be in the constitution. The problem is that the other third vehemently disagree with the 2/3. So I think that's still, we're going to have to come up with a way of resolving this. And I think that's one of the reasons I think there's going to be a geographic diversity among, chatbots. I think because we're going to need different guardrails for different places, and different societies will think certain things are more appropriate than others.
But there will be common areas.
Yeah, I think there will be commonalities. And that's one of the things we could try to do at the international level, is come up with what are those commonalities.
But is it, counterintuitively, is it correct to say that maybe we need more powerful AI models in order to make sure that they will be safer, because we simply need them to be that sophisticated to make it happen?
Well, yeah, this is, again, an idea that the folks at Anthropic, Dario Amodei, who's the CEO of Anthropic, has this idea that you have to build 90% of the unsafe thing in order to do the research on how to make the system safe. I think that's a little bit dangerous way of thinking, but I do think there's a little bit something to it, that we need to advance the systems to a certain degree to test, how we could control them. But it's also one of the reasons I think you need a regulator there sort of looking over the shoulder of the company to say, okay, well, at what point are we reaching a limit at which we shouldn't go any further? I also think there's some interesting research on if you've built something that's relatively powerful, how do you distill the learnings from a large model down to a smaller model? And I think there's some interesting research that's come out on that. And I think we may end up, through building these larger models, and more powerful models, create smaller models that are actually more controllable, but it will be because we've done the work on the large models.
And the last chapter, the very last ending of your book actually brought me things some further. Last week, my kids and I visited the Mogao Grottos located in northwest China. So standing interest from the ancient murals, mostly colorful paintings, religious writings on the wall in the cave, I was actually profoundly shaken by the fact that this was created by the very same human beings more than 1,000 years ago. But think about that. When our descendants saw writings, paintings, even music sheets, will they still be amazed knowing that these could actually be the creations of machines? So will this fact discourage today's artists and writers?
I hope not. I think it is a potential risk that people will stop appreciating, human-created objects and art. But I actually don't think it's a huge risk. I think there's plenty of room here still for human creativity. And if you look at sort of the most profound contributions, particularly to advancing the edge of any art, it's still going to be done by humans. It may be done by humans in collaboration with AI and using AI as a tool. But I think ultimately that to try to, particularly if you look at how a lot of these AI systems are trained, they're trained on past human works. And if you're trying to advance where art is going, it's very hard for these systems to actually make an advance that goes beyond their training data. In fact, they really can't, in many cases, do that. But a human can. A human can potentially prompt this, use what the AI produces, but then put a human touch on top of that does really advance the art form. And in the book, I talked to a number of artists who are trying to do this. There's a photographer I talked to who takes these big monumental kind of canvases panoramic photography, and then he applies an AI layer that provides some interesting visual effects, but then he does traditional photo editing on top of that. I also talked to a writer who kind of takes the most bizarre outputs of AI systems and incorporates that into her writing and uses it as kind of a foil for things she writes. So she has the AI in kind of conversation with her, which I think is interesting also as a way to think about how artists can still create human-written and human-advanced art.
So just as you wrote, we need co-pilots, not autopilots.
Yeah, that's right. I have to say we need co-pilots and not autopilots.
Yeah, so again, you wrote, I quote, AI is actually bendable, so let's hope we can skew the odds in favor of those more positive outcomes, not the other way around.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jeremy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maiwen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.